A very hearty welcome to today's session on the ethics of linguistics by Julia Kristeva. Hope we are all going to have a fruitful 1 hour about. I hope this lecture will extend for about 1 hour, and we are going to have a very good session here. So this is what we are going to see today. We'll have an introduction to Julia Kristeva, the author, and this particular piece, the ethics of linguistics, it's divided into 4 parts. It's introduction, the struggle between the poet and the sun, rhythm and death, and the futurist future. So we'll be dealing with all these things. The time will be divided between this. And Julia Kristeva, I would call Julia Kristeva as one of the most profound and original thinker of the post-1960s. She is hailed by critics as one of the most profound and original thinkers. And she is one of the triumvirate, that is, we call as Trimurtis, of the early 1980s feminist post-structuralist theories. And the other two are Lucy Irigaray and Helen Cusack. And Kristeva belongs to the post-feminist group of critics who were not for the equality between men and women. Whereas they argued that in order to appreciate the multiple subjectivities of women, one has to recognize the fundamental differences between men and women. Only if you recognize the difference between men and women, you can appreciate the subjectivity of women. And we can also call her as one of the pioneers of post-structuralism. And regarding her nationality, she was born in Bulgaria, and she made her intellectual career in France. She wrote in French, and she taught at the University of Paris, and she maintained to be one of the brilliant and versatile of the French intellectual figures. So here, the piece which we have to read today is the ethics of linguistics. And here she questions the attempts of the linguistics to give a scientific and systematic accounts of language. And the way she begins her essays, she poses as a question: what is ethics, and should there be ethics in linguistics? Actually, the term ethics is derived from the Greek word ethos, which means character. In any branch of study, when we brood over the ethical standpoint of the same, can we say that we are concerned about the moral integrity of the subject or the trustworthiness of the same? I think listeners, students, you can just think for a while. What is exactly ethics? When you hear the word ethics, what comes to your mind? I'll give you 1 minute to think over that. Okay, it's not 1 minute. Still, the silence, it's intolerable. So, what do you mean? When you hear the term ethics, what comes to your mind? Can we say that the ethics of theories, moral integrity of the theories, the trustworthiness of the theories? Yes, the term ethics brings into all these concepts into our mind. So here we can say that the core discussion of this particular piece is the ethics or the moral integrity or the trustworthiness of this branch of study called linguistics. Right from the opening paragraph of Ethics of Linguistics, one can get the taste of Kristeva's criticism. She, in a very strong language, points out that linguistics behave like God. That is, she uses the term Janus, like behavior of the of the linguistics or the modern grammarians. They put forward theories, they put forward normative behaviors for the speaking subjects, which means common people like us. And whereas they themselves are anarchists, they are asking the speaking subjects to behave like this. You have to think like this. You have to behave like this. Whereas they cannot be coded within a structure. There are also people who mixes ideology. What they do, they often picks up something from the leftist newspapers and they mixes it with the linguistic theory. In my class, I used to make the analogy which I always used to bring in is put in the period. That means put in the tenga. So you tell something and you mix a bit of ideology. You describe something and some ideology in between. So Kristeva, she gives us a list of changes that have been happening since the 19th century. We all know that we have studied this in our theory papers itself, in our social history of England. As students of literature, we read this often. Since the beginning of the 19th century, a lot of changes have been happening around the world. The Western world, in fact, has been witnessing many changes in the intellectual life, in the political life, in the social life. New discourses came in many forms, in the form of Marxian theory, in the form of Nietzsche, in the form of Freud. What they did was they kept on reformulating the old ethics into new, right? Whenever a, whenever a new ideology comes, they will be reformulating the old ones. Otherwise, you cannot bring something new. And here she gives an interesting explanation about the ethics. So she says that ethics are those concepts which brings a group together by the repetition of a code. For example, a political party will be having its own principles. It will be repeating it again and again and again. Be it beyond, in India, we give importance to nationalism. So you repeat the same code again and again and again, be it a political party, be it be a religion. What you do is you repeat the code together and you keep the people together. And in fact, this relationship, that means the people being together under a banner, under a belief, this is coercive and it is grouped together by force, not according to me, but according to Julia Kristeva. What is my contribution here is Vali the title, The New Normal, and which is in the slide. But interestingly, when another ideology pops up, like what is, since the beginning of the since the beginning of the end of the 19th century, we have been witnessing an onrush of ideologies. But after 1950, say after 1950s, when something comes emerges as a new one, the old ones, they are not ready to accept it. That is, when after a particular period, when a new ideology is popping up and when someone is trying to bring in a new theory, the same old group cannot accept it. And then they bring in the issues of ethics. Hey, ethically, this is not right. So in order to safeguard their own viewpoints, they bring in the issue of ethics. For what? To oppose the rise of a new theory. And she gives you examples for this: fascism, Stalinism, and including linguistics. Fascism and Stalinism, we know that, of course, the term itself stands for totalitarian rule. But very interestingly, she brings in the concept of linguistics also here. So she says that these ideologies, they places the barriers often. They do not want a new ideology to come up because In the case of linguistics, she is giving the case study, taking the linguistics as a case study here. They are still based in the order of principles, which was in the beginning of its inception. For example, she gives the systematics. That means they're not ready to change. When linguistics was in its infant stage, they gave importance to systematics. I'll explain what is systematics. The systemic linguistics is of British origin, which emphasized on the social function of the language. And what they do is they still cling on to the basic principles. They are not ready to change. Even they cling on to the 17th century principles, the same old structuralistic logistics. She says that, and she gives another example to prove that it is useless. It's foolish. She says that you cannot read Myovsky or Klepnikov in the reading of Klepnikov or Myovsky will not be the same today as you read it in the 1940s, because the society, the social condition has changed. She says that you cannot read their poems with the same intensity as you did in the Hay period of communism, especially today in the background of the fall of the Soviet Union. So the meaning has changed. The context has changed. So how can you cling on to the old concepts? How can you cling on to the old ideologies? So in the what we are talking about is there in the introduction. In the remaining part of the introduction, she recalls the contribution of the masters like Saussure, Mallarmé, Ottod, and Romain Jacobson, as if or so as to lay a ground for her arguments. First, let us take Saussure. She says that it is Saussure who turned linguistics into a science. It is after Saussure, the problem of truth in linguistic discourses got dissociated from the speaking subject. After Saussure, the search for truth was reduced within the internal consciousness or within a particular metaphysical theory. Maybe they have used Cartesian theory for this. That is, Cartesian theory is that an individual's mind is separate from the body and the outside world. The Cartesian theory, I repeat, Cartesian theory says that an individual's mind is separate from the body and the outside world. So after Saussure, what happens was the search for truth was confined within the what you say internal consciousness or some metaphysical questions. And she also talks about Mallarmé and Ottod. She's she's not telling who told exactly, but she's telling that a linguist has believed that in the last 100 years we have only two significant linguists in France. They are Mallarmé and Ottod. And also we have Heidegger. Heidegger, he contributed the principles of existentialist theory and he brought this state of being. He told about the concepts of struggle between the world and the earth. I will take a break here. It's not exactly a break. I'll just a distraction. What I want, my students in IFA college are familiar with what I'm going to tell now. Always what I want to advise is in a 1 hour session like this, I cannot cover the existentialist theory or the theory of Saussure or the Mallarmé or Ottod. What you have to do is whatever I'm telling you is just this is just an inspiration for you. After this session, take your mobile and search who is Heidegger. What do you mean by this state of being? Who is Mallarmé? Who is Saussure? What is his contribution to structuralism? What is his contribution to linguistics? And write it down. Write it somewhere so that all this will be useful for your preparation for the NET exam, UGC NET exam. So don't leave it as such. After this session, please don't leave it as such. This is just a pointer for you. It is you who have to find out who is Hediga, who is Malame, and who is Seshur, because I cannot concentrate on this particular these theories, because I have to cover what is told by Julia Kristeva in the Ethics of Linguistics. Okay, so this is for for you. This is my advice to you, my dear children. So now, Heidegger has told about the world and the earth. He has told about the being of things, and about the rhythm, logic, etc., etc. And we have Freud. I think more than Heidegger and Malame and Saussure, you must be familiar with Freud. You know who is Freud. So after the discovery of Freud's concepts of superego, ego, unconsciousness, conscious, etc., it changed the whole world. It brought the whole world upside down. It was a new concept, and that has influenced the literary the writers they also. But what even Freud has influenced the readers, influenced the writers. He brought in a new methodology of reading the poetic language. But Freud himself is considered the writers as his predecessors. Freud has changed the way we read, but he considers the writers as his predecessors. And the avant-garde movements, again, another term, avant-garde, it is not there in the slide. The avant-garde movements, avant-garde writers, you can go in search of avant-garde writers also. The avant-garde writers, they were aware of the changes brought in by Freud, but at the same time, uh, they bypassed him for the sake of the language, for linguistic experiments. And the same was the path taken by Romain Jacobson. It's Jacobson. And we can see that Julia Kristeva is an awe for Romain Jacobson, and she is considering him to be her master. The remaining part of this essay centers around Jacobson's contribution or Jacobson's theories to linguistics, and she explains everything with Jacobson as the axis. Okay, so she says that Jacobson has contributed a lot to the field of linguistics, phonology, structural linguistics, and even to Slavic studies. She came from Bulgaria, and she was very Julia Kristeva herself has contributed to the Slavic studies, and likewise Roman Jakobson also has contributed to the Slavic studies, to the research, to the epistemology, history of linguistic discourse, to the poetic language, to the technical nature, and whatnot. I think it is after Saussure, according to Kristeva, it is Jacobson who has contributed a lot to the growth of the field of linguistics. And Jacobson has, in fact, defined the origin and end of the linguistic episteme. And he contributed a lot for building a new model of language. He talked a lot about the rhythm, death, and future, about which she has borrowed to explain the poetry of Mayakovsky here in Ethics of Linguistics. And Kristeva talks about her experience of listening to Jacobson in the Harvard University. She's telling that it was quite an experience to listen to Harvard University's recording of Roman Jacobson's 1967 lecture. See, as we are listening to the lectures of Julia Kristeva or Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak in YouTube today, Julia Kristeva also had, in those days, they had only recordings, and she happened to listen to the recordings of Roman Jacobson, and she was telling that it was an experience because he gave the reading of Mayakovsky and Kletnikov, and how he read it, It was not just, it was quite an experience to listen to Harvard University. It was not like that. He imitated their voices. It was lively with the rhythmic accents, sometimes thrust out throat in the militant tone, sometimes with the softly whispered words, sometimes with the swishing, whistling sounds, with different vocalizations. So that was indeed a voyage. Jacobson took the listeners to another plane, or took the readers to those 1940s or 1930s where Mayakovsky and Klepnikov read their poems. And Kristeva says that you cannot enjoy the poem of Klepnikov, or you cannot enjoy the poem of Mayakovsky without understanding the historical background, without imbibing into you the October Revolution, without imbibing into you the history. Without that, you cannot understand the rhythm, you cannot understand the phonology, you cannot that means the linguistics, they cannot understand the rhythm unless you go to the core of that poem. So she says that the linguistic professors may not know this, and here she moves on to giving you some examples. Here we have the second session, that is the struggle between the poet and the sun. So here, two tendencies seem to dominate Mayakovsky's poetic craft, according to uh, Julia Kristeva. So here in this session, we are going to talk about the rhythm in Mayakovsky's poetic craft. So I have another advice for you after this session. You can also Google for Mayakovsky's poem. You can listen to his poems. You can listen to his poetic readings. It is available in the YouTube, and it is available in other web pages also. I promise you that it will be an experience for you. So the two tendencies which dominate Mayakovsky's poems, according to Kristeva, is the rhythmic rupture and ego. So remember this. You have to remember two words, that is rhythmic rupture and ego. See, she has quoted from Mayakovsky himself in a text, from the text "How Are Verses Made," and it was translated by G.M. Hyde. I would like to read it here. I walk along, waving my arms and mumbling almost wordlessly, now shortening my steps so as not to interrupt my mumbling, now mumbling more rapidly in time with my steps. So the rhythm is trimmed and takes shape, and the rhythm is the basis of any poetic work, resounding through the whole thing. Gradually, individual words begin to ease themselves free of this dull root. See, why do you love a poem? Like William Blake's. You might be remembering it even now. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hands or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? See, you cannot forget this poem message. Once you learn this poem, that will be there in your mind forever because of the rhythm that is contained in this poem. I'm telling you, I'm giving you the example of Blake because I'm sure that most of you are not familiar with Mayakovsky's poems. That's why I'm giving you this example. So you can, when you recite this poem, you can bring in the tiger, the bright eyes which is burning in the night, everything. All these images will come to your mind, and it is the rhythm in the poem which is in fact the soul of a poem. So that is what she is telling here. So this extract which I read is which I read tells in the words of Mayakovsky how he felt rhythm, how he developed rhythm while he was walking. So it is there within you. And the Kristeva, she gives a beautiful, I don't know whether it's beautiful, Okay, it's a beautiful analogy of crowning a tooth. You will be putting cap in your teeth, when you're to make it in a good shape to give you a very wonderful smile. So likewise, it's like the analogy which she is giving here is the crowning the tooth. Like what will happen? Actually, I don't have experience with that, but still, what is given here is, I don't know whether it is that painful, because people in our today are, we can say everyone we take tooth cap. So she says that what happens when you crown the tooth? You will be looking into it. You will be putting different sizes and to see whether it fits you or not. So maybe a dentist has to try 100 times to put a crown on the tooth. And if it is a wrong size, okay, every time it will be very painful for you. And after the 100 attempt, that means on your 101 attempt, he presses one and that fits. So this is the same case with the rhythm. But during in that one attempt, what will happen is there will be tears in your eyes. You will, and at the same time there is a sense of relief. That is the same kind with the same case with the rhythm. The poet has to find out which rhythm suits his poem, suits his idea. So anything can be, and the rhythm can be there in everything. Like it's in the rhythm is there in all kinds of repetitions. It is there in the noise. It is there even in the fan that is there above me, in the rocking motions, in the sound of the sea, where it gets endlessly repeated. So anything can provide you a rhythm. See, even there can be rhythm in the rotation of the earth. So that goes on and on. So what is happening is, as this cap is fitting into your teeth, here it is the crown of, it is capped with the crown of language. So here we have to bring in this rhythm in the language. So what the struggle here is not between the teeth and the crown, but between the word and the force uh, gushing with pain. So you have the pain here, the pain in the releasing of a word. So the repetition, everything is there. So the crown is the language here. So this is one concept. Okay, this rhythmic rupture is one concept. So the analogy which he is talking about here is the crowning of the tooth. As if you crown the tooth and experiment with many sizes, and finally one fits in after so much of struggle and pain and bringing in a sense of relief. Likewise, the rhythm is fit into the language. And next, we can move on to the next concept, that is the ego. So the rhythm is there, the poet is there. So the ego is there in the language. The ego is there in the crown. Ego is there in the crown of language. So what is ego? uh, Now you don't have rhythm, you don't have sign. What you do, when ego comes, there is no rhythm, there is no sign, there is no word, there is no structure, etc. But here the ego dominates. What is ego? I is the, here I is not the teacher or the what the student or the reader. Here the I is the poet. I is the, and I is the sun. So here the poet is let's talk about the sun a little bit later. So here the poet is declaring that I am here, I am there. So here she reads from another poem of Mayakovsky. Today I am Napoleon. I am the chief of armies and more. Compare him and me. So this is from a poem of Mayakovsky, and this is called by Trotsky as the erection of the poetic I. So this is the ego of the poet, and it is expressed through this usage of I. So here I becomes the powerful ego. So the rhythm is there in the center, and you have a powerful ego of the poet, and it is compared to that of the sun. So in the image you can see a sun there. So this I, the poet, is compared to the ego of the poet is the sun. So this image, the sun image, also gets repeated in the theories of Julia Kristeva, the black sun, etc. And the sun is used to denote the paternal image. Paternal image stands for, are you afraid of your father? This is a question to you. So paternal image is something which is very coveted, respectful, feared, murderous also. And so in some other poems, she has quoted, you can read from your text, she has quoted from the poems of Mayovsky, where you talk about this for the figure called sun. So she says that I can give many references from other poets also, like Betail, Zirano, etc., 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 where they talk about this poetic ego, which is expressed through the image of sun. The I is bound to the sun, I is subjective to the sun. And uh, very interestingly, you have another image from Klepniko here, which is a sort of antithesis, which is just opposite to that, where in the poem, like Otter's children and the God of Virgin, the mother is coming to the aid of her children to fight against the sun. So he says about Otter's children, the God of virgins, etc. So interestingly, all these people, Klepniko or Mayovsky, they are talking about, they are taking images from the mythology, about which we'll be discussing later in this session. So you have, so all this pagan mythology is brought into the study of linguistics. So what is happening here? The struggle, I'll just have a quick rewinding of this session, the struggle between the poet and the sun. He is bringing in the sorry, Julia Kristeva is talking about the rhythm in the poems. Before that, she was talking about the reading of Jacobson reading Mayovsky's poems and how rhythmic it was. Then she moves on to the importance of rhythm in the poetry, and she gives a reading from Mayovsky himself, where he talks about how rhythm is brought in through the words, how the poet's experience. And yeah, she uses an analogy here, that is the crowning of the tooth, where and as a dentist repeats the experiments to find out the perfect fit, here we repeat the experiments to find the perfect rhythm. And then she brings in the image of the sun, the ego, which is expressed to the paternal image of the sun. The ego, ego is the ego of the poet, I, and is represented through the paternal image of the sun, which gets repeated in the many poems of the futurist poets. That is not only Mayovsky but also other poets, including Klepniko. Klepniko, you have a difference. Klepniko is presenting the mythology of the mother protecting her children from the father's son, from the paternal son, that she is protecting. Okay, so this is a sort of antithesis image. So we can say that, I'll just make these comments. So here the male is taking, in Kristeva's writing in general, male takes the shape of the sun. And the sun is in fact a threatening entity, because sun constrains an individual's life as a writer and as a social being. Okay. So here sun is a threatening, in Kristeva's writing in general, sun is a threatening being who is constraining the life of the poet. And also, sun is the agency of the language that molds and limits the rhythmic rhythmic life. And the poet tries to escape this in his writing. Okay, so there is a struggle between the poet and the sun, and the sun is the forces that limits a poet, the forces that will not permit a poet to express what he is himself. And it is in the process, or it is in the process of struggle to overcome this, you get a new creative work. So here the sun is a threatening entity, as well as I told before, it is also a paternal entity. So both paternal and threatening. So in Mayoski's poem, you have it as a paternal entity, whereas in Klepniko's poems, you have it as a threatening entity, that is male, that controls the, because this father image, the father controls the relationship with others in the family, ensures that family is safe, the family, everything goes well within the family. So it has both positive and negative side. So it is the poet's struggle with the sun that is resulting in the rhythmic rupture of the poem. Okay, so now so as this will be uploaded in the YouTube, you can hear it again and again, so that some concepts will be there in your mind and that will be helpful to you while you're writing the exam. So now let's move on to the next session, that is the third one, that is the rhythm and the death. So Jacobson, in his book called The Generation That Wasted Its Poets, he asked, how do we speak about the poetry of Mayakovsky now? Because what prevails is not the rhythm today. This is not the exact quote. I'm just making I'm taking a teacher's liberty to make a bit change. But what we have is the poet's death, or I'll quote it now. But how do we speak about the poetry of Mayakovsky now that what prevails is not rhythm, but the poet's death? So, unquote. So see the title itself, The Generation That Wasted Its Poets. Very interesting. So Kristeva is telling that, Kristeva and Jacobson is telling that you don't have rhythm now because the poet is dead. And what is happening here is the murder of the poets. And this crime, this murder of the poets is done not only by an individual, but by the society as such. The crime here, to be more concrete, the crime is the murder of the poetic language. So, and when you say that the crime is conducted by the society is not just the Russian society. As Mayakovsky and Kretnikov belong to Russia, don't think that it is just the Russian society alone. It is the Indian society, or anywhere, Western society, or anywhere in the world. That can happen anywhere in the world. So when you're not ready to change, when you're bothered about the stability, when you're bothered about the life, what happens is when you say that no, new ideology cannot be brought in, stick on to what is told by Karl Marx as what happened during the eve of Stalinism or Nazism or fascism. So in those periods, what happens is actually the murder of the poets. So Kristeva says that you cannot stabilize a society when during the era of Stalinism, or during the by most of the communists during the communist regime. What they thought was that, okay, when you stop the close or when you silence the poets, you can stabilize the society. No, it's not so. When you silence the poets, you cannot stabilize the society. So, and at the same time, only the poets, only the poetic language can carry the struggle against this death. That means the murder of the poet. Only through poem you can, only through poetry you can struggle against this conditions in the society, against the murder of the poets. So Jacobson also points out that, you know, in these poems, in these poets, you can see that murder and suicides are the themes that gets often repeated. So you have murder there, you have death there, and it is this murder and death and the unchanging society. Keep this word in your mind: unchanging society, the society that is not ready to change, the society that clings to the old principles. These represent the inability to hear. That is fascism. Inability to hear and understand the rhythm, the language. And here, the poet is put to death, because when there is no rhythm, the poet is naturally put to death. When there is no language, the poet is naturally put to death. So when nobody is there to listen to you, when nobody is there to understand what is signified, what is the pure signifier there in the poem, when you are not ready to read a poem as such, in fact, what happens? There is a murder. See, when if you want to kill a poem or a poet, you need not take a knife and stab him. No, when you fail to read, when you misread the poem, that itself is a murder. When you cease to, when you stop to understand the real signifier, what happens? There is a murder. So then let's move on to the hope. I think you understood this session, the rhythm and the death. What that it's not that this murder is not it's not murdering someone physically. This is symbolically. This is a symbolic death. So now let's move on to the final session, that is the futurist future. So Jacobs, sorry, I don't know this Jacobson, it's Jacobson. Jacobson, he has observed that Mayovsky and other future poets like Klepnikov, they are interested in the resurrection. Resurrection, messianic resurrection. And he also observes that, okay, this is the favorite theme of the medieval poetry too. So here in our poems, how the resurrection happens, the resurrection happens in this way. The sun, S-O-N, sun, assumes from his son father, S-U-N-F-A-T-H-E-R, the son takes the role of the son father, that is the task of completing the self and rhythm. So a poet who comes after, who comes in the next generation, he'll be taking the role of his previous generation to find out the self, to find out the rhythm, and the process continues. And Mayovsky and Klepnikov and all the poets referred here are future poets. So again, you can, after this session, you can refer the futuristic poetry in Russia. So these futurist poets, what they envisioned about the future emerged from the present. It is rooted in the present. So what happens here is a poem or a poetic language transforms or structures itself into a nucleus of historicity or monumental history. Okay, that means a poem itself develops into a historical or assumes into it it turns itself into a nucleus of historicity. So, and it is the futurist poet who were successful in this in particular because they were successful in exploring the concepts like signifiers, autonomy, and expressed it in a transmental language. So I'll put it in other words. The futurist poet, even though their name is futurist poet, they are not for the, it's not that they forgot the present. They didn't escape from the present. They are rooted very strongly in the present. For example, in the case of Klepnikov or Mayotsky, it is the October Revolution. They rooted themselves in the October Revolution or the Bolshevik Revolution. That is the present historic moment, and they sang for the future. So when Mayotsky and Klepnikov are singing about the future, what they actually did was they leapt to the past. You know, that is why they talk about the sun image or the virgin god and all these images, mythological images come into their poems because to talk about future they use the mythological past. So when you talk about when you are talking about the futurist poet, we say that they are talking about a non-existent future because we do not know what is going to happen in the future. But so they are talking about a non-existent future, impossible future. But while they are talking about that impossible future, non-existent future, they are deriving the sources, they are deriving the material from the mythological past. And critics, this is about the futurists. Now let's move on to the critics. Critics always in their poetic discourse, what they do is they try to measure rhythm in terms of meanings. Okay, they want to know about the language structure. So when you're so much bothered about the meanings, what happens is you miss the meaning. When you're so much bothered about the language structure, you will be missing the present. You will be missing the dreams of or the core of October Revolution in the case of these poets. And so as readers, we should learn to imbibe the rhythm in a word or a poem. Okay. You should know to feel the pulse of the poem. So a poetic language, you know, it will be having all the tensions of the metaphysical meaning it carries along. The poem will be carrying the burden of meanings, will be carrying along with it the truth, violence, etc. And we readers should know to find the pulse of the poem. We readers should never miss the soul of the poem, which you can imbibe only if you understand the pulse of the poem. Okay. So remember, a poem will be having thesis, antithesis, themes, sub-themes, etc. And the reader should know to decode all this. So there will be different meanings in a poem, and the reader should know to decode all these meanings. At times you may feel that the discourse which is generated is just opposite of what we have grasped. But don't worry, every poem will be having many readings, many different readings. It may produce very different meanings because all these poems were written in the with the base of a future impossible. So Kristeva says that this is a phenomenon, all these different meanings and decoding of the meanings. It is induced by the fight between the rhythm and the sign system. And we are talking about all these poems, about the futurist poetry in the context of Mayakovsky's suicide. So you just go and see what happened to Mayakovsky, what happened to Ator, what happened to Klepnikov, all these poets who dreamt of a great future, who dreamt of changing the whole world through October Revolution or Bolshevik Revolution. You just go and see what happened to them actually, what happened to their ideologies, what happened to their principles. And we are reading these poems in that background. In a way, you can say that in the background of their failed lives or the failed ideology. But does that mean that all this reading is useless? No. Here comes the concept of resurrection. That is, the resurrection should happen through I, the poet of the next generation. Or when you, as I will be just bringing the reader response theory, the poet will be taking a new birth in the poet's mind himself. So we have to rebuild that language structure again, because when we are rebuilding, when you are resurrecting a poem that is produced 100 years back, what happens is you are bringing back the reflections of the language then and the society then. So Kristeva, in the concluding paragraph, she tells that Jacobson's theories, actually whatever is told so far is a modification of Jacobson's theories. So she says that his theories are still relevant, especially in the age of generative grammar. So you know Noam Chomsky's grammar. So today is the age of generative grammar. Even in this age of generative grammar, Jacobson's linguistic theories has a place of his own. And whatever Jacobson has told about metaphor, metonymy, parallelism, elision, all these linguistic concepts can be applied in the generative grammar also. And in general, all these linguistic approaches of Jacobson can be applied in the generative grammar. So what happens, but instead of this, what happens in here in our critical world, the world of theories, is that the theorists demand historical epistemology. They're like, you know, what happened? You put 1, 2, 3, you have to narrate what happened, and you try to know what is the signifier, what is signifier, signified, etc. That is the theory of the structuralist. This is in fact outdated according to Julia Kristeva. Remember, Julia Kristeva is a post-structuralist theorist, and therefore the concepts of structuralism are outdated according to her. And what she wants the speaking animal or as to have is to feel the rhythm, to sense the rhythm of the body, to feel the upheavals in the history. Which she says that the contemporary theories do not confront this. They are not bothered about the rhythm. And we, the readers, should feel the rhythm. That is, I'll repeat, you should feel the rhythm, you should sense the rhythm, and only then you can feel the upheavals in the history. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to me.